We, on your speaker. Tell her to go on the Zoom. She's in her car. She can go on the Zoom on the car. All right, folks. We are live here at Chabad Zichron Kadeshim. Baruch Hashem, back for Sunday nights together with everybody live. And in order that we can get you from New Jersey and all the way to from Peru and Germany and even Colorado, we have the best guacamole over here. David, where are you? I want to say thank you. Let's make a bracha together on the guacamole. It's ha'etz baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri ha'etz.
Amen.
Amen.
Whoa.
Save me some, please. Please save me some. I'll mute myself.
David, we're going to save you, but it's going to be a little soggy. Yes. No, I've got a and now on the Hadama, we make a bracha baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei pri Hadama. I want to thank David Romero, for those who don't see him, and the rest of the crew over here. David, please say hello to everybody.
Hello there, how are you guys?
Invite them to come to try your guacamole.
You guys need to come here to Zichron to learn with Rabbi Fine and with all the Jews here and try a little bit of guacamole. It's delicious.
All right. I think we're going to need a chaser for it, though. All right. So we're going to take a little bite and then we're going to start. Oh. Amazing. Oh, yeah. A spicy parsha. Exactly. Now that we got the spice for the body, now the spice for the soul. Oh, okay. I don't know what that was. Okay, folks. Some of you might remember, and some of you might be too young to remember, where you were June 1967. I was young. Tell her the whole world's listening. She knows. Oh, that's why. Maybe don't tell her that. Yeah. The
Hebrew school.
I
was in Hebrew school.
So what happened? Israel was facing three nations. Right. From the south, we had Egypt. From the north, we had Syria and Jordan to our west. And of course, as we know the story, the miracle that happened after an intense fight for 6 days. Oh, okay. 1 second. Let me just take a moment to mute. Nothing personal, folks. But if you have a question, then you'll unmute yourself, okay? By all means. All righty. So after the 6 days were over, the Sinai Desert was ours, the Golan Heights we captured, and of course, East Jerusalem, including Temple Mount. 19 years earlier, we lost East Jerusalem to Jordan in the War of Independence. And that was the first time that we had access to the Western Wall for those 19 years. And actually, it was the first time in 1900 years that Yerushalayim Hakota B'Yadenu, as those words, very infamous words of, I think it was Yitzhak Rabin, if I'm not, was it Yitzhak Rabin? No. It was Chief rabbi then. One of the chief rabbis. Yeah. In any case, we annexed the East Jerusalem, declared the city as the eternal undivided capital of the Jewish people. So we're going to share the screen over here. Now, let's see how technically talented I am. We'll find out. Don't get your hopes up. Oh, look at that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, my usual bracha. We'll make it now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei.
Amen.
Amen.
Chaim, everyone. Chaim.
Man.
Okay. Menachem Hillel, you're missing something. We missed you.
Right.
We missed
Right,
you too.
Okay, indeed.
Okay. Okay, there we are. You can see on the side some people. Okay. So, on June 28th, 1967, the Israeli government announced that the official unification of Jerusalem would take place on the following morning. Some people feared that too swift an opening of the 19-year-old barriers would lead to tensions and violence. But the Minister of Defense, Moshe Dayan, was emphatic that there should be no hesitation and no delays. Dawn came and we did it. Teddy Kolak later wrote, mayor of Jerusalem. We removed all the fences, dismantled all the checkposts, and started blowing up all the dividing walls. Jerusalem, once again, a physical unity, a single city. Jews were ecstatic. I was a kid. I remember being ecstatic about it.
I was there.
You were there. Oh, okay, amazing. Now, of course, the UN tried to pass, resolutions. Resolution 252 against the illegal status of us taking from the Palestinians. And of course, this sparked many clashes, many terrorist encounters, and the difficulties that have emerged ever since. So Jerusalem is ours, no doubt. But it's been a lot of pain and suffering that we have gone through, and maybe even others as a result. How do we see all of that? And how do we understand it? And some people have a difficulty justifying it. How do we justify it? So that will be our discussion today, and understanding what makes Yerushalayim the special city that it is, the undivided capital, how it became that way. It's not so simple. We're going to see that it's everything in Jewish teachings and Jewish life is a process, right? But a process begins somewhere. So we're going to go through it and best understand, okay? Now, the truth is, before there was Jerusalem, right? Maimonides tells us, well, something that we know because we learn in the Chumash, right? What do we learn in Chumash? Text number 2 from Maimonides. It's not all clear there. 1 second. You can't read it, right? Because of the, there we go. Okay. It's clear. Okay. The Torah already specified that the tabernacle be built by Moses was only temporary. At the passage states, you have yet to arrive. This week's Torah portion. It's only a temporary, right? As soon as they entered Israel, they erected a tabernacle in Gilgal for 14 years, during which the time they conquered, which was 7 years of conquering Israel, and 7 years that they divided the land. So that was temporary. From there, they came to Shiloh. Shiloh was near Jerusalem, not Jerusalem, right? And they built there a stone house without a roof. It was covered instead with the coverings of the tabernacle. The tabernacle had 3 different layers of covering made from goat skin, different tachish skinned, and that was its covering from the tabernacle. And it stood 369 years. It's a long time. When Eli the high priest passed away, Shiloh was destroyed. Anybody know who destroyed it? The Philistines.
Shiloh belonged to Yosef.
Shiloh was part of Yosef, yes, exactly. And it was in the territory of Yosef, yes. When the prophet Samuel passed away, then the Jews came to Nov and built a temple there. When the prophet Samuel passed away, this too was destroyed, and they came to Givon, where they built a new temple. From Givon, they came to the eternal home in, Jerusalem. Yerushalayim. Hold on. Oh. Doesn't show the bottom here. How are we going to deal with this? We're going to put it over here. Okay, there we go. If you let David in, please. So it was in Givon, and in Nov and Givon, it was there for 57 years. Okay, that's it. Actually, that's the end of it. Okay, perfect. Actually, one second. Learning how to deal with this properly. There. It's covering the Hebrew. All right, at least you can see the English. Okay. So when was the first temple built? Does anybody know their history? 1312 BCE, before the Common Era. How many years ago is that? Over 3,000 years ago, right? 3,300 years, over 3,300 years ago, the first home for God was built in the desert. It was there. It was not no permanent location. It traveled in the 40 years in the desert. Then they came to Israel in 1273 before the Common Era. There in Gilgal, 14 years, right? The 7 and 7. 7 years conquering, 7 years to give out the land to the 12 tribes. So it was a temporary place. Once that was divided, so now Shiloh, 369 years. That's a long time. How many countries, lasted for 369 years? This is Shiloh, small town in the hills north of Jerusalem. As we said, it was made from stone. That was different than the tabernacle, because the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was made from wood. This had more permanence to it, but it didn't have a roof to it, right? It was an open roof. And then that was destroyed by the Philistines. Then 57 years again, kind of in between. And finally, King David captured Jerusalem. He purchased Temple Mount, and he made there a temporary site until finally it was established in the year. What year? Anybody know? 830 BCE, right? 2 temples. The first one stood for how many years? Anybody know the first temple?
420 years.
410. The first was 410. The second was 420. Exactly. So from 850 BCE, before the Common Era, to 420 before the Common Era, right? That's 410 years, right? And then from 350, there was 70 years in between, right? 350 until 70 of the Common Era. That's 350 and 70 is 420. That's how long the second temple stood. And now we're waiting for the third one with Mashiach now.
Rabbi, the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in
Yes.
586 before the Common Era. So the math, I don't understand the math.
It was 600 something.
586.
Anyway, we're going, there can be disputes with numbers. We're going to go with these numbers now. Okay. And we can have a discussion about that another time. Okay. Now, there are many locations that house the temple and the tabernacle, but only Shiloh and Yerushalayim have something exclusive about it. What's exclusive about it? What is the place? What is the place when you come to the Holy Temple? Is a place of bringing offerings to God. So once it was given that these are the locations, Shiloh and Yerushalayim, everywhere else became a prohibition to bring an offering. Let's see the Sifri on this. See if this is going to work. Oh, okay. Text 3a. See in front of you? Until they came to Shiloh, private altars were permitted. You could have your own, and you wanted to bring an offering to God, you can have it in your own backyard. Make your own barbecue. Have your own and bring an offering, right? But once Shiloh, private altars were banned.
No more private.
When they arrived in Nov and Givon, private altars were reinstituted. You could have it for those 57 years. But once in Jerusalem, private altars were permanently banned. That's what happened, okay? What does that mean? So the Torah tells us this about God's chosen locations. Let's look at a text from this week's Torah portion. You must eat the tithings of your crops, wine and oil, as well as the firstborn of your cattle, the sheep before God, your God, in a location of his choosing. How many times is Jerusalem mentioned in the 5 books of Moses? 0 times. Not once is it mentioned in the 5 books of Moses, right? We'll understand a lot more about that. The term Jerusalem, we will see that there is a way to make it up there, but it's not so simple, right? So the Sifri that we just quoted over here, the sages identified that there's a location for God's choosing, because what does it say here? Of his choosing. So what did God choose? He chose both Shiloh as a place of his, right? And Jerusalem. Not the Mishkan, because that was not a place, because that was always on the move. The 40 years that they were in the desert, they were on the move. So Shiloh is a place that God chose. And likewise, of course, Yerushalayim, right? But all other places, there's nothing exclusive about them. God didn't choose them. And the proof is that you could do your tithes, you do all the things. You don't have to bring them to Nov or to Gibon or to Gilgal. It wasn't necessary to do that. You could do that privately on your own. Okay? Exclusive are only those two, right? So then the question is, if that's the case, we were always under the assumption there's one choice place of God called Jerusalem. But no, the Torah tells us there's 2 choice places, Shiloh. And after all, 369 years, you can't say that it's not chosen. There's not something special about it. That's a long time. And it's exclusive that only there you could bring the offerings during that time. So if that's the case, we've suffered in the last 2,000 years because of our hold on Jerusalem a lot. And it's the focal point of humanity, shall we say, that's caused a lot of discord and a lot of violence. Hey, let's just move to Shiloh. Why Jerusalem? Now, of course, it's almost like a stupid question to ask, but emotionally, it's a stupid question. Because what do you mean? Jerusalem is our eternal capital. That's true. But if the Torah tells us clearly that God chose the 2 places, so what's wrong with the alternative? Again, intellectually, we're asking. I'm not asking this on the emotional level. Of course, Jerusalem is what's dear to us. I don't even know where Shiloh is. I've never visited Shiloh. So what's your question?
The West Bank. It's in the West Bank.
With the fire.
Yeah. Right?
So pretty sure we're not going to do this.
So in other words, when the nations of the world come and tell us that you are thieves, that you stole the land, right? It belonged to other nations and you don't belong there. It doesn't belong to you. So we get emotional and we usually respond in an emotive manner. But usually, it ends up that whoever you're responding to, you're preaching to the converted, to the choir, right? Who already believes. But what argument is there that, in Jerusalem, that it remains this eternal capital when God chose also Shiloh? So let's go some through history. Is that? Okay. I thought there was some water running here that I wasn't aware of. Not a problem. Not a problem. Okay. So we have to go back in history. Jerusalem is not Jerusalem because of King David conquering Jerusalem and buying the property, as we will see soon. Jerusalem happened a long time before that. It was singled out already in 1743 before the Common Era. That's almost 1,000 years before it was built, almost 1,000 years. What's the story? Do you remember Abraham had a nephew by the name of Lot, right? No, a name of Lot. And after his captivity and after the war, after a war, Shem, who was one of the sons of Noah, he was the king of Shalem. He invited Abraham for a celebration. And I don't know, maybe they had guacamole and maybe they had some, for sure they had. I mean, this is this is Mediterranean stuff, right? And it's as good as here, that I can't tell you. But this is great stuff. Thank you, David, again. And so where was Shalem? Where is this place called Shalem? Well, you guessed it. Shalem. It was Jerusalem. Where they had their meal is Yerushalayim, as Nachmanides tells us in text 4a. Shalem is Jerusalem. As the psalmist wrote, his tabernacle was in Shalem. From time immemorial, the nations knew that this was the preeminent location situated at the center of the inhabited world. It is possible that they were aware of the cosmic significance of this location. It was located directly under the celestial sanctuary where God's presence is manifest. Adam knew about this place, which we'll get to in a moment. Adam, he taught his children. Noah knew about it. He taught to his children. One of his children is Shem. Shem is the king of Shalem, where now Abraham is having a repast with him. How did Adam know about this place? Because he's actually created from there. He's actually the clay that he is made from, the dirt that God used is from Temple Mount. Yeah, it's from Temple Mount. Huh?
Great Adam?
What?
Great Adam?
Yeah.
Wow.
Maimonides says, there's a widely held tradition that the location of King David and Solomon's erected the altar, the threshing floor that David purchased from Aravana, is where Abraham erected the altar upon which he bound Isaac. This is where Noach built his altar after emerging from the ark. This is where Cain and Abel built their altars for their respective offerings to God. Adam built an altar where he brought an offering to God, where he was created, as our sages proclaim. Adam was created in the very spot he received atonement. He was created in the place where the altar would be, where he would receive atonement from the dirt there. So we see that over the years, before there's a place called Jerusalem by the name Jerusalem, it's already been a place from Adam, Noah. That's where he brought his offerings. Cain and Abel, and even before that, Cain and Abel brought, right? It was already the central spiritual place of the world.
It's Evan Shetiyah, the foundation stone.
That's later. Yeah, the foundation stone of creation. Actually, yep, exactly.
Rabbi, in Arabic, they call it Al-Quds, which comes from Kadosh, Quds, Kadosh.
Uh-huh.
That's the holy.
Holy, okay. So why did God choose Jerusalem, the first temple? What makes it such a holy place? Because obviously it is some gateway that people brought their offerings there and connected. So if we go another story that is told in the Torah, this one we're all familiar with. This is about Yaakov Avinu, Jacob. When he took the firstborn blessings, he had to flee from Beersheba, from Israel, and he went to Haran, right? In the middle of the way, what did he do? He slept somewhere, and he had a dream. Where did he sleep? Temple Mount. That's where he went to sleep. He dreamed, and behold, a ladder was firmly on the ground, but it stopped to reach the heavens. And behold, angels are of God ascended and descended the ladder. So he saw this ladder that linked heaven and earth. What's the cosmic significance of this? That this is where he dreams it's a gateway to heaven. He's overwhelmed by this. Right? And what does the Torah tell us then? Jacob awoke and proclaimed, indeed, God is present in this place, and I did not know. He didn't know that that was Temple Mount. He was frightened, and he said, how awesome this place is. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate to heaven. Ooh. This is the important point over here. This is the intersection between two places, heaven and earth. It's the nexus between the spiritual and the material world. And hence, that's why our prayers ascend there, right? And that's the metaphor further, as the Medrash says. This teaches anyone who prays in Jerusalem is considered to have prayed before the throne of God's glory, for it is the gateway to heaven, is in Jerusalem. The gates are wide open in this place for our prayers to be heard. And the passage states, this is the gate to heaven. So it's our gate. That's the ladder that we're going up, right? The ladder that the angels are going up. What are they taking? Our prayers. And what's descending? God's blessings. 6b, God's primary providence is over this land. God certainly pays attention to all countries, but his primary concern and providence is over this land. From this land, his blessings extend to the rest of the world. It is like the heart that is positioned at the center of the body because it is a source of life and it distributes its life force to all the limbs. So what is unique about Yerushalayim? It's the nexus between heaven and earth. It's what brings together the spirituality and the materiality of this world as one. Why don't you just mute her? You know how to mute her? No, mute her. Huh? Okay. All right. Let's see what the Medrash says further. It gives it as a metaphor as the navel. Is positioned in the center of the human body. So is Israel the center of the universe. As the passage states, those who reside upon the navel of the earth. Israel is the center of the universe. Jerusalem is the center of Israel. The temple is the center of Jerusalem. The sanctuary is the center of the temple. And the Holy Ark is the center of the sanctuary. What does it mean, the navel? It means the nexus. Just like the navel is sort of like the midpoint, the higher elements of the person, the heart and the mind, and the lower elements of the person. So likewise, this is to bring between the heavens above and the physical world. It is the gateway. That's what it is. What does that mean? Givoin and Nov are not the gateway. The tabernacle in the 40 years in the desert is not the gateway. How about Shiloh? Didn't we say it's God's chosen place? How do we understand that? Well, it's very clear, because if everything that happened, welcome Sharon, everything that happened, right, happened where? Temple Mount. Adam created there. He brings his, he makes his altar there. So do his two children, Cain and Abel. So does Noah. So does Avraham make a
Akedat Yitzchak.
huh?
Akedat.
The Akedah of Yitzchak, yes. Right. But Shiloh also didn't have the history that happened there. So then what was it chosen for? Why does God choose it? Then we need to answer, we need to understand the distinction between Shiloh. Again, the history isn't there, but God's choosing is there. So if God chooses, isn't then that make it special and unique? Is it only because of the history that took place in Jerusalem that makes it special over Shiloh? So what I'll suggest is that we have things backwards. We think history creates a reality rather than God creates the reality, and therefore history unfolds as a result of what God chooses. Yes, well, let's understand. We'll get that in a moment. I mean, everything, but we're trying to understand how we need to we're Chabad. Chabad means we have to understand the best we can, right? We know that there's a history in Jerusalem, right? But we also know that God chose both Shiloh and Jerusalem. So what is the distinction between the two? That all of the history occurs in Jerusalem, and that is our eternal capital. We know this. We know this intuitively. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but we know it intuitively. We need to understand it now with Chabad, with our minds, so it becomes a truth that we internalize rather than we just emotively sense it, right? So we're going to come to this week's Parsha now, and to understand a few verses that I want you to be careful to follow the nuance in the verses and what the distinction between them is, and from there we'll get our answer, okay? Let's begin. Okay, this week's Parsha, it says, do not bring offerings in any place you choose to God, right? And when I choose the place, you choose now a place. You can't bring, remember we said that was exclusive about the two places that God chooses, right? Only in the place that God will choose from among all of the tribal regions to set his name, there you will seek his presence. There you may bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices. That's the first text. That's from this week's Parsha, verses 4 through 6, 3 verses. Then we're going to skip till verse 11. And it's repeating. But in Torah, there's no repetition. There's always something, a nuance. What is different between what we just read and now? Bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, to the place where God, your God, will choose to establish his name. Beware lest you bring your burnt offerings to any place you choose. You see any difference? In order, look for the order of things, because it's really saying the same thing. I'll go back. What's the difference? Almost. What's the difference? You see the difference, folks?
Tribal offerings.
Sorry, what? Andrew, go ahead.
No, it says among the
I didn't
tribal
catch what-
regions. God will choose among all the tribal regions. And then he talks about us in the other one.
Burden.
Okay. All right, good. Any other distinctions? So over here, the first thing, in the first instance, we first get the prohibition. Don't bring offerings where you want to bring privately. First is and then is the place that I choose. But in the second instance, bring all that I command you to the place that I choose. In other words, it's not separating. For the first one, don't bring an offering private, only where I tell you to, in the place that I choose. In the second instance, the choice is together with it as one. And then the prohibition comes afterwards. Choice first, prohibition after. See, beware, verse 13, it says, beware, lest you bring your burnt offerings. That's a prohibition, right? And the verse before that is to the place that I will choose. Here, the prohibition comes first. Don't bring your offerings. First is the prohibition, then the choice. Now you might think, oh, what's the big deal? There's a big deal. Because there's two ways we make choices in life. How do you make a choice? Usually, you make a choice when you have a reason. Reason prompts you to choose something, right? So here, the Jewish people are settled. They need a place to be. They need a place of gathering. They need a synagogue. They need a home. They need a place, right? So they can't be everywhere. Everybody's gonna, you have to have some kind of community. You have to have a place where the Jews can come and they can offer. That's Shiloh. Pragmatic thing. We need a sense of community. You can't be just devoted to God in your own backyard and make an offering. We need to be able to come together as a people. So therefore, God says, no more. Right? And you have to come to Shiloh. And we did for 369 years. But the second instance, God is saying something different. He's saying, I'm choosing this place. You know why? Because this is where I want to be. The other one is pragmatic, that we need to find a place to congregate. So therefore prohibition, and you're going to go where I'm going to tell you, to Shiloh. But God's not choosing that as his home. He's choosing that a place for us to congregate. God's now saying, when he first chooses, I'm choosing because this is what I want. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to be at home. This is where I want my presence, my divine presence, the Shekhinah, to rest. Let's see this in the Rebbe's words from this week's Sikha. God chose Shiloh only because of the prohibition to bring offerings elsewhere. This required a dedicated location to bring our offerings. This tells us that it wasn't inherently holy. Rather, it was chosen for a particular reason, right? For a reason. I don't want you to bring offerings everywhere. I want you to come collectively. Jerusalem is different. God did not choose it to provide a particular concern. Rather, God chose it to be his place. And since it was his place, it is only right that we can bring offerings there. This is his home. So you want to get close to God? You want to bring an offering to God? Where are you going to go? You're going to go in your backyard? You're going to go somewhere else? You're going to go where God is. So he chose Shiloh for the sake of the Jews. He gave them a place where they can bring offerings. He chose Jerusalem for himself, as it were. He chose a place in which to dwell. So the choosing is not for a particular reason. It's for no reason. This is where I want to be. It's like, so when you can choose a home, when you're hunting for a new home and you choose and you're going to a different place. This is where I feel right at home. Other places might be very practical and they'll serve practical things, but maybe you don't feel really at home. But then why do you feel at home there? It's beyond transcendent reason. It's not based on reason. It's based transcendence.
Good rent.
Huh?
Good rent.
Good rent. So when did God choose this? When? From the very beginning, God chose. He didn't choose After everything happened historically, look, what divine providence. Look how many things happened over here. I think I'm going to take this place. So many good things happened here. That's me and you. That's what we do. We see good things happen in one place. Like everybody that comes here, they only find good things that happen to them when they come to Chabad Zichron, because it's chazak. It strengthens you, right, Sharon? Only good things happen here. So therefore, so many good things happen. Oh, I feel at home here. That's human. That's normal, but that's not God. So we create God in our image so that we think God did the same thing. Well, look at all the occurrences, divine providence, all these things happen in this place. That's it. I'm choosing this place. David, this is where you're going to make my home. No, didn't work that way at all. It was an essential desire of God that is beyond logic. So you can't say, but that makes sense. Why there? Because he chose it. That's why it's the nexus between heaven and earth. That's why it is the spiritual conduit between the spiritual and the material world. That's why it is the flow of divinity that from there our prayers go up and everything comes down, not just for Israel and for us, but for the entire universe, for all of humanity, everywhere. And that's why Shiloh can't be the place. Because God, he chose it not for a reason, not because it reflected his core essence. And this is what he chose that is beyond and transcendent of logic. He chose it for a practical, reasonable purpose for the interim. And once it was destroyed, there's no holiness left there because it only served a practical means. Gather together the people for the sake of the people. They need a place to come to, right? As many people say that during COVID, we were very, we can say it now, people needed a place to come to. So we made sure, okay, certain times we couldn't, but once you could, then you could kind of, 10 people. We made sure 10, it was 10 here, 10 there. Why? Because there's a need of gathering the people, and that develops a will there that you do something for that. That was Shiloh, but that's not an inherent desire that God wanted. What he wants is Jerusalem. He picked it. Not because he chose the clay there. Before that, he already chose. Before even, that was his original thought. In his original thought, in Machshava Gdumadak, as it's called in Kabbalistic literature. Is that clear? Does that make sense? And therefore, and now I chose and consecrated this house, so it will be that my name will be there forever. Shiloh's not there forever. Destroyed. There's no holiness left there. We don't go visit. I don't even know where exactly it is. It's part of our history. It's part of our history. As many other things are part of our history, but it's only in the past. Jerusalem is in our hearts and will focus there for all times. It's in the present. So now the question is, obviously the question that you're thinking, and you didn't say it yet, but I'll say it for you unless you want to say it. Why didn't we get there right away? If this is the place, huh? What's the question? Well, let's take one question at a time, one step at a time. You're moving a few centuries later. Let's talk about the Jews come into Israel. Okay, we understand 14 years in Gilgal. We understand that was a temporary, get that, right? We had to battle and we had to divide the land. But after that, 369 years, come on. Why didn't God allow us to have Jerusalem, or didn't make that available for us immediately? After all, that's his real desire. What happened? What took so long? Right? So the simple answer is we wanted it, but God didn't allow it. From the book of Joshua, the tribe of Judah was unable to dislodge the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem. What does that mean they couldn't? Why couldn't they? Well, God's not strong enough. Took us out of Egypt. He fought all of our battles, and we were defeated everybody else. Then we could defeat. Of course we could. It wasn't that they were too strong, but there's something in history that we have to remember. Don't forget your history. What happened? Abraham gave his word that the Jebusites, that they would be able to retain their domain over their place. Rashi in explains that they were able, but they were not permitted because of the oath Abraham had sworn by Avimelech, the king of the Philistines. What happened? Abraham and Avimelech, they made a peace summit, the original peace summit. And there was real peace between them. They agreed on what were this agreement. Avimelech pledged that he would not start up with Abraham and his descendants. Right? In the Philistines in Israel, right? Cannot. And Abraham, what did he pledge? That to his descendants, we would not conquer them for 3 generations. We wouldn't dislodge their descendants from the domain. So what do we have in the book of Genesis and the story? Now swear by God that you will not lie to me, my children and my grandchildren, 3 generations. Treat me with the kindness that I showed you concerning the land in which you sojourn. Right? He was in the land of the Philistines. He wasn't a Philistine, but he allowed him to sojourn, to live there, and he would protect him, be unharmed. Hey, but peace treaty means 2 sides get something, right? What am I getting? That my children and grandchildren, you will have mercy upon them. You won't start up with them. Well, who was one of his grandchildren were the Jebusites that had controlled Jerusalem. So we couldn't capture it. We couldn't capture it until it came to the final grandchild passed away. And then King David was free to conquer Jerusalem. In the days of David, the generations covered by the pledge had passed. And now we could conquer the land. And that's what happened, right? David conquered, but he didn't proceed right away to build. Why? Because he acquired it through violence, justified violence. Blood on his hands, right? Exactly. And therefore, that's why he didn't build the Holy Temple. Had the plans for it, but didn't actually do the actual building. His son did. But even just conquering Jerusalem wasn't sufficient. He waited until the owner of Temple Mount consented to be sold. As Jerusalem he conquered, but Temple Mount he purchased. The book of Samuel, Aravana asked, why did my master the king come to my home? David replied, I came to purchase your threshing floor for the purpose of erecting an altar for God upon it. And David purchased the threshing floor and the cattle. He had conquered already. Wait, what are you coming to me? You conquered. No, I'm paying you. And David erected the altar there and placed burnt offerings and peace offerings upon it. Why did he do that? He had already conquered it. So the simple reason is because he didn't want to bring an offering to God through violence. Eventually, that was a temporary offering, right? It was not yet the Holy Temple built, but even a temporary offering, which he could at that time, right? Because Shiloh was destroyed. There was only Givon and Nov, and that 57-year period in his time period. So you could bring offering outside of those places. So he wanted to bring, but he didn't want to bring in God's altar through bloodshed. So therefore he purchased it. That's a simple explanation. A deeper explanation is, who did he learn from to purchase? Abraham. Abraham purchased from the Chiti, right? From Ephron Lachiti, right? He purchased it, right? Even though he said, I could take this by law because God had already had promises to me, but I will purchase it and I will only, and he wanted to give him a deal. What did he say? Full price I'm going to pay. Why? That we should not have where the holy place of God's presence is going to be merely through conquering, because if you conquer, then you could be conquered too. But we have it through conquering, and we have it through rightful deed by purchase. By purchase. We have the document. Torah tells that purchase right here in the book of Samuel. So it belongs to us, not just by means of conquering. It's one manner, but conquering is not permanence. Purchase is permanence. You have the deed. And therefore it's ours. Just like Hebron, Ma'aseh Machpelah. So likewise, the threshing floor, meaning Temple Mount, it's ours also by buying it completely. So it becomes exclusively ours. Okay. Are you satisfied with this?
Absolutely.
Sorry that you asked that, but yes.
Your face.
How could you be satisfied with that? That's the only reason, because of our practicality, that like Avram Avinu didn't have a vision of the future and seeing that we're going to go into Israel, and now because of this is going to hold back that we can have access to this holy place that Adam knew about, Noach knew about it, Shem knew about it, Avram knew about, everybody knew, all the holy people knew about it, right? If you can let Sarah in, please. One second. Okay. All these people knew about it. Avram knew about it. So he wouldn't take into calculation that maybe, he knows that we're going to get the land, we're going to get it, right? So why would he give something to the Jebusites that now pushes back? So there's a deeper reason of why. So Yerushalayim is called Yerushalayim Shalem, the city of completeness, of unity, of peace. Yira means fear. Fear of God that brings about peace and unity. Meaning fear of God, not fear of punishment. But what is Jerusalem? Ultimately, what is it? The presence of God. The presence of God, right? Just like we all know that when you're in a room by yourself, so if you had this guacamole, you might just, eat it, and who knows? But when you're in the presence of others, you eat it differently, right? Because in the presence of other people, human nature is that we have a sense of the presence of another that's called fear of, not fear because they're going to judge us necessarily, not fear because they're going to say whatever, but just the sense of presence of another. We act differently, we behave differently. So what is Jerusalem? The presence of God that is meant to bring about peace and unity amongst the Jewish people. Guess what, folks? We're lacking in that area, not just today. Back in the day, when the Jews came into Israel, and for the many generations, yes, Jews got together for the sake of fighting our enemy. But once the squabble was over, there wasn't a unifying force amongst us that brought us together and brought unity amongst the Jews. Until King David. He was the unifying factor. He was the one who brought Jews together as a nation under Hashem, not only in battle, but even though he waged many a battle, but he brought together the oneness of the Jewish people. And that is a crucial element in order for us to have Jerusalem. So we had to wait hundreds of years until we evolved as a people in order that we should be able to have Jerusalem as our undivided capital. Again. As the Malbim says, Jewish unity requires two elements. The role of Jerusalem was to unite the nation as a single body. As it's written, Jerusalem built up is like a city joined together. Ir shechuvra yachtav. For there the tribes ascended by making national pilgrimage to Jerusalem. All Jews facing in one direction. The particular organs of the collective coalesced into a single body. Jerusalem was thus to the nation like the heart that pumps oxygen throughout the body. The kingdom of David brought the nation into a single unceasing rulership, as it is written, for there sat thrones of judgment, thrones for the house of David. David's kingdom was to the nation like the brain that provides awareness, intelligence, and coordination to the body. Only after King David united the nation could the temple be built in Jerusalem. This established a permanent presence for God among the people and bound the people of God. So it wasn't just a logistic historical reality that we had to wait, right? And this is, again, what's the important point over here. We see history unfolding and we think history is what is pivotal. It isn't. It's God's choice that he chose Jerusalem and therefore history unfolds there. And it's our choice that we become united as one people, that therefore we can have Jerusalem as our eternal capital. So it evolves from the need of the Jewish people to become a single body, right? It wasn't because of what historically happened. History occurred as a result of what occurs on high by God and below down here by the Jewish people. We are the nexus, right, between heaven and earth individually as a Jew, and Jerusalem is that collectively of the Jewish people. And hence, this is the city of God. And what does that city of God, this chosen city, just like as the chosen people that we are, and the chosen city to be God's home, what that evokes in the Jew is not a sense of ego, not a sense of haughtiness, but on the contrary, humility. It evokes in us a devotion to being more kind, a devotion of being committed to others and to bringing them closer under the wings of the divine, right? And with integrity, with authenticity. That's what it brings out. Now, there's unity. Unity comes from a humility that we sense the value and the importance of every single one of us, right? If every one of us feels that we are, God's gift to humanity, then of course, that's what all the other nations of the world that think that they are God's gift, what they do is enslave others rather than being serving to others. But the Jew recognizes that Jerusalem is the chosen city for God's presence to be revealed. The Jew is the chosen people that we are here to reveal the presence of God through the Torah mitzvahs that we all fulfill, and to enlighten the nations of the world that they also have a duty, they also have a responsibility to be connected and to be ambassadors of Hashem, to bring the light of the 7 Noahide laws at least, and to fulfill them and to change the world for good and to bring Mashiach now. All right, let's get everybody over here. Okay, we got over here. Let's, folks. Oops. Any questions? Can you see? No. Okay. There we go. So we got a nice large class over here online. And okay, any questions, folks? Too many questions. So ask them. Anybody online have a question?
Do we get to keep Jerusalem?
Absolutely. It's eternal.
I know,
Even-
I don't-
It's not changing, right? It's eternal capital. Huh?
Shiva is there.
The Shekhinah is there, right? The divine presence of Hashem is there. That's not changing. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
It was based on unity.
No. That's why it was only until unity that it was revealed where God wanted his name to dwell. That's why the Torah doesn't tell us Jerusalem, because we have to get our act together till God could place it, that we could have it, that we could reveal that truth. Is that truth there? Yes. Why? Because before creation, God already chose the place, as we learned. Shiloh, he only chose it for practicality, that people need to gather. You need to have a sense of community. You need to have a gathering of people coming to worship God collectively. So he chose Shiloh, 369 years. Yes, that's more than a lifetime of a nation, right? But that's not his ultimate. Already there. And that's why all the things historically that occurred there because it's so special. Because God chose it. Why did he choose it? Just because.
Could be any reason.
Just because.
Right.
That's no reason.
Why-
Or every
why-
reason. Yeah.
Why wasn't Sarah buried there?
Sorry?
Why did Abraham not bury Sarah in Jerusalem?
Why not in Jerusalem? Because Jerusalem is the nexus between the physical world and the spiritual world, right? There, Hebron is, we have 4 holy cities. Jerusalem is one holy city. Hebron is another one. And Hebron, its holiness is the quality of earth, and therefore it was there to be buried. It's not the nexus between heaven and earth. Jerusalem is. Good question. Any other questions? You had a question? Tim. No, to this. We're talking here. This is our discussion.
Question, Rabbi. Even before the building of the.
Speak up.
Even before the building of the first temple,
Right.
is it safe to refer to Eretz Zion as Beit HaMikdash? Like Beit HaMikdash?
Before it's built?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the place where it would be, but why would, it was not called
Even like, since we kind of know that God.
So we had readings and we showed of the different occurrences that were there, but it wasn't called the Holy Temple. Holy Temple is when it's built, right? So we wouldn't go, it's a holy place, but we wouldn't call it the Holy Temple because it wasn't built. Only when it's built, then we would call it that, right?
More practical question.
Yes.
Jewish people are not united. Everyone stands. What can we do to unite those people?
Bring everybody to learn here. I promise you, if they learn every week what we learn over here, the Jewish people will be united. Huh?
But David united us. So Jerusalem was revealed, right?
And that's not, and that doesn't,
And if we're not unified today, that's further down the line.
no, it doesn't take away from the holiness of Jerusalem, but of course, we're missing the point of it and what we need to do. So yeah, you have to bring people here. That's it. Otherwise, how are they going to learn? They're not going to learn by, without learning Torah, without learning Hasidus, without the Rebbe's teachings.
When I was at Herzliya, and we were preparing our grade 11s to go on to CJET for college, knowing that they'll be facing discourse, right? Debates over the legitimacy of Jerusalem. Yeah. So this would be a beautiful thing too, because we actually had a course that at that time to to help prepare them to be perfect team. Why Jerusalem needs to be our holy city. Their same place.
Very good. So actually, I want to add to, thank you for bringing that up, Alan. Thank you. I want to add a point over here, an important point, folks. And this is part of the problem why we're having a challenge today with Israel, because we're afraid to speak the truth. We speak, what do people say? The prophets trod on the land of Israel. Abraham was on the land of Israel, right? But that's not our, and so it was conquered by David. He bought the land itself, right? But what is our essential right to the land? God chose it. Until we don't use the G word in our vocabulary, that God, he chose Jerusalem, he chose Israel, and he chose Jerusalem to be the holy city and Jerusalem to be the holy land, right? Until we don't learn to use that word and say that the core essence of why is because God chose. God chose why? Just because he chose, and he can choose, right? Until we are comfortable with that and express that to others, we will lose the public relations battle, because we're giving reasons and so on. Don't give a reason. God gave it to us. It's our land. And if we cannot say the word God to the nations of the world, who incidentally, we brought that notion to them. They were pagans, right? They were all pagans. And we brought that notion. If we can't bring that notion to the world again, we've missed our calling. Then we can't be united, because we are a nation under one God. Yes, in God we trust.
USA.
And yeah, we're embarrassed. We feel that it's not, it's not PC. It's not what we don't care what PC is. We care about the truth. And the truth is, it's God that gave it to us. Otherwise, what right do we have to the land? What right? Conquering isn't sufficient. He conquered and bought it, David. But conquering means you could be conquered. That's the law of Torah, by the way. Law of Torah is also conquer means you can be conquered, right? Buying means you have a sale, right? So you have a contract. You have something that shows that you own it. But even that could be taken away from you. There's one thing that can't be taken away from you. That God gave it to me. It's my land. My land. It's your land. Right? And without that notion, and when you say it authentically, because you really mean it, and you really believe that, you know what? Nations of the world will listen. But the problem is we live in an era where we are hunchbacked because of exile. 1900 years of exile, of being thrown out of over 100 countries, pogroms and holocausts, that we're kind of a little bent over and we don't stand straight. But there is one person who stands straight, and that's the Rebbe. When we hold on to the Rebbe and his teachings, then our little crookedness, we can stand up straight, a little more straight, and we won't allow the exile to bend us over, and we will be able to speak the words of truth, unapologetic. Not halavai. No halavai. Start with yourself. There's no halavai. There's just me. I have to live it. I have to believe it. It has to be part of my DNA. Part of my DNA, then I'll be able to carry that message forward. All right, folks. Amazing. Yes.
There's a big misconception
Jacob,
that why
David, sorry, we have a question over here. Sorry, David, you'll have to wait. You have to wait, David.
Okay.
Right.
this is a bit wrong matter. But I remember when we were doing the Torah, did he call the place back out or?
Yeah.
So he called it Bethel, but it actually was Temple Mount.
Yeah.
So today, there's no Bethel in Israel. It's.
I mean, well, I don't know if there's a modern day place called it, but
Okay.
yeah, but I don't. They sold it.
What?
There was, right?
We also have one in Mexico. It's turned with the foundation.
A house of God. House of God.
That's us. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask you tomorrow.
Yeah, that story is a very key story because it is what creates that spot in our awareness as the nexus between heaven and earth, right? That story, that dream that he has, that's what it reveals to us. When does it come completely? To him, it was revealed at that moment. When is it revealed to all of us? When King David conquers, buys the property, and then ultimately by his son Solomon, it's built the Holy Temple there. Yeah. All right, folks, I got to run because we got TSR coming up, TRC, Tanya Rabbi Community, and I still have to dump. All right, thank you. This is amazing. All right, next week we continue the celebration over here. All the Montrealers are invited here. I want to make you jealous.
And today was the
David, tomorrow, I have to run. I can't. I've got to. It's impossible. Sorry.
Everyone.
Tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Danke sehr.